Oscar adjusted his tie for the third time that morning, staring at his reflection in the elevator mirror. At 32, he still maintained the same youthful look he had when he joined the company a few years ago. His brown eyes shone with the expectation of the possible promotion that lingered in the air. The doors opened on the 15th floor, and he walked through the familiar corridors to his desk. On the way, his eyes met Susan's, his boss, who gave him a discreet smile. No one there had any idea that the two had dated in their teenage years, long before their professional lives crossed paths again at that company. Susan had quickly risen through the corporate hierarchy. Her hair always impeccably styled, and her determined look were her trademark. She carried with her an aura of leadership that inspired respect throughout the team. Oscar settled at his desk, turning on the computer and organizing the papers for another day of work. Beside him, Patricia arrived, smiling as always. At 30 years old, she was the kind of colleague everyone loved to have around. Her wavy brown hair framed a cheerful face, always ready to infuse the environment with good humor. "Good morning, Oscar. Ready for another day of battle?" Patricia joked, sitting at her desk beside him. "Always ready," he replied with a smile. "And how was your weekend?" "Oh, the usual. Series marathon and chocolate," she laughed. Nothing too exciting in this spinster's personal life. Oscar laughed, but noticed a slight melancholy tone behind Patricia's joke. It was curious how, despite being so well liked by everyone, she rarely spoke about her life outside of work. Weeks went by, and the rumors about the promotion intensified. Oscar knew that his results made him a strong candidate, but he tried not to get his hopes up. It was on a seemingly ordinary Wednesday that everything started to change. He was in the break room, pouring himself a coffee, when two colleagues entered, arguing in low voices. Upon noticing his presence, they became visibly embarrassed. "Is there a problem, guys?" Oscar asked, puzzled by the atmosphere. Mark, one of the senior analysts, cleared his throat before speaking. "Oscar, sorry, but there's something we need to clarify." Oscar's heart raced. "Sure, what is it?" "Well, there are rumors going around that you and Susan had a relationship in the past," Mark said, clearly uncomfortable. "And now, with this whole promotion thing..." Oscar felt his blood run cold. How could anyone have found out? "Look," he began, trying to stay calm. "Susan and I haven't had any relationship for many years. Something from my teenage years has nothing to do with what's happening to me today. Look at my numbers and results." "Of course you and Susan have a relationship," accused another colleague present. "Everyone notices the way you look at each other." "No, we don't anymore," Oscar insisted, feeling cornered. At that moment, as if sent by fate, Patricia entered the break room. Oscar, in a flash of desperation, saw her as his only escape from that embarrassing situation for both him and Susan. "Even more so because Patricia and I are dating," he said, surprising everyone, including Patricia herself. For a second that seemed like an eternity, Oscar feared Patricia would contradict him. But to his relief, she understood the silent plea in his gaze. "Yes, Oscar and I are dating," Patricia confirmed, her voice firm despite the surprise. "And I am not at all pleased with these rumors I've been hearing that he and Susan might be involved." Their colleagues were left speechless, muttering embarrassed apologies before hurriedly leaving the break room. Once they were alone, Oscar let out a sigh of relief. "Patricia, I don't even know how to thank you," he said, running his hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for involving you in this, but I promise it will just be for a few days until the whole story about me going out with Susan is forgotten. Then we'll say you couldn't stand me and broke up with me. I'll even be down and crying in the corners for a few days," he joked, trying to ease the tension. Patricia laughed, her eyes revealing a mix of amusement and something Oscar couldn't decipher. "It's okay, Oscar. That's what friends are for, right? Besides, it will be fun to pretend to be a couple for a while." In the days that followed, Oscar and Patricia made an effort to keep the facade convincing. They had lunch together every day, exchanged knowing smiles in the corridors, and when they noticed curious glances, they didn't hesitate to share subtle affections. One afternoon at the office, Oscar found himself admiring Patricia's profile. The sunlight streaming through the window made her hair shine and highlighted the delicate freckles on her nose. He was surprised at how he had never noticed how beautiful she was. "Why are you staring at me?" Patricia whispered, catching him off guard. "Oh, I was thinking about how well we're doing in this fake dating story," he replied, feeling his cheeks warm up. Patricia smiled, but Oscar noticed a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "Yeah, we really are. Who would have thought we'd be such good actors, right?" As time went by, the touches and glances that were once rehearsed began to gain a surprising naturalness. Oscar found himself looking for Patricia around the room, smiling involuntarily when their eyes met. The shared laughter in the cafeteria was no longer a performance, but genuine moments of connection. One morning, while having coffee in the break room, they were surprised by a group of curious colleagues. "So, how did you two start dating?" asked Lisa, one of the receptionists. Oscar and Patricia exchanged a quick glance, aware that they hadn't agreed on a story. "Well, it was..." Oscar began, hesitant. "It was at a mutual friend's birthday party," Patricia interrupted, smiling. "Oscar looked handsome that night. I couldn't resist when he asked me to dance." Oscar raised an eyebrow, surprised by Patricia's inventiveness. "Yes, exactly. I had been gathering the courage for months to ask her out." "Months?" questioned Tom, another colleague. "But Patricia, didn't you say last week that you two got closer during a project?" Patricia's smile faltered for a moment. "Ah, yes, the project. Actually, it was during the project that we started to get to know each other better, but I only had the courage to ask him out at the party." Oscar nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. "That's right. The project brought us closer, and the party was the final push." The colleagues seemed to accept the explanation, but Oscar and Patricia exchanged worried glances. They needed to be more careful from then on. 2 months had passed since the beginning of the charade. The rumours about Oscar and Susan had completely ceased, and his promotion was announced without any controversy. On a Friday afternoon, while organising his new desk in the manager's office, Oscar realised it was time to end the act. He found Patricia in the break room, his heart feeling strangely heavy. "I think today's the day for you to break up with me," he said, trying to sound casual. Patricia looked at him confused for a moment before understanding. "Ah, yes, of course. No one is talking about me and Susan anymore. Everyone acknowledges that I was promoted because of my work," Oscar explained, feeling inexplicably sad about the idea of ending things with Patricia. "Ah, yes, of course, Patricia replied, forcing a smile. "Tomorrow I will break up with you." That night, lying in his bed, Oscar found himself reminiscing about the moments of the past 2 months. The laughter, the lively lunches, the knowing glances. He realised with a pang in his chest that he didn't want it to end. The next day, Oscar arrived at the office anxious, not knowing how Patricia would stage the breakup. To his surprise, she didn't show up. Not the following day either. Colleagues began to ask, concerned, and Oscar found himself genuinely worried about her absence. After the second day's work ended, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Oscar called Patricia. His heart froze when she answered with a weak voice, informing him that she was in the hospital. Without thinking twice, Oscar drove there. He found Patricia in a private room, pale but with a faint smile on her lips upon seeing him. "Oscar, you didn't have to come," she said, her voice a whisper. "How come?" "Patricia, what's happening?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and holding her hand. It was then that Patricia revealed the secret she had kept for so long. 3 years ago, she had been diagnosed with a rare type of leukemia. She had undergone intensive treatments and was in remission, but always lived with the fear of a relapse. In recent days, familiar symptoms had returned and tests confirmed the disease was back. Oscar felt as if the ground had disappeared from beneath his feet. How had he not noticed? How had Patricia carried this burden alone for so long? "Why did you never tell me?" he asked, feeling tears forming in his eyes. Patricia shrugged. a gesture so characteristic of her. I didn't want to be treated differently. At work, I could pretend I was just the fun and carefree Patricia. It was my refuge from reality. At that moment, looking at Patricia so fragile in the hospital bed, Oscar felt certain. What had started as a facade had transformed into something deep and real. "Let's abort the plan for you to break up with me, okay?" he said, leaning in closer. "I'm not going anywhere." And then, gently, Oscar kissed Patricia for the first time. A sweet kiss, full of promises and understanding. In the months that followed, Oscar was by Patricia's side at every stage of the treatment. The chemotherapy sessions, the good days and the bad, the nights of fear and the mornings of hope. What had started as a fake relationship turned into the truest love story both of them had ever lived. At the office, everyone was surprised by Oscar's dedication. A year later, when Patricia finally received the news that she was in remission again, Oscar proposed to her. The ceremony was simple, attended by co-workers who had become a true family for the couple. As they exchanged vows, Oscar and Patricia couldn't help but laugh when they thought about how it all began. An innocent lie that led them to the deepest truth of their lives, proving that sometimes destiny has curious ways of bringing together two souls that were meant to meet. And so, what should have been just a passing farce turned into the most authentic and exciting love story that company had ever witnessed. Oscar and Patricia discovered that sometimes you have to pretend for a moment to find a truth that lasts a lifetime. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.